All right, so the idea of the long-term growth trend is that the U.S. economy tends to grow over time. It grows, but it doesn't grow straight up. You see how the line is a squiggly line rather than a straight line? The straight line points toward up, but it doesn't go up evenly. In fact, it goes up and it goes down, and then comes back up and goes higher, but then goes down again, right? But notice that the highs, each high is higher than the previous high, and each low is higher than the previous low. Now, how do we know what's high and what's low? The peaks are the highs, right? So as we peak, that's the highest point of that economic cycle. But after we peak, we have what's called contraction, where we start to go below that long-term growth line. But over time, we expect the economy grows. See the long-term growth trend? That's the straight line. But the squiggly line is how we get there. It takes a lot of pain and suffering sometimes to get back to that line of long-term growth. We call those peaks and troughs. Peaks are the top of the economic cycle. We hit the peak, we contract, we go towards the line again, then we go below the line until we hit the trough, the bottom of that economic cycle. Then we start to recover. We go towards the line again. You see the recovery? And then we expand. Once we get to the line, we can expand above the line, set a new high eventually. We'll hit the peak for that economic cycle. We'll contract again. And then until we hit the trough, and then we start to recover again. So notice the peaks, each peak is higher than the previous, and each trough is higher than the previous trough. Right. No, if it gets worse, the lowest low, you see how the first trough is lower than the second trough? Okay, the trough is the low point. And that each low point, each next low point is at a place higher, not lower, than the previous low point. So you wind up with higher highs and higher lows. And that's how you know you're growing. If you have higher highs and higher lows, you can still have highs and lows. But if the highs are higher than the previous and the lows are higher than the previous lows, then you're growing. So over the long period of time, our U.S. economy has always grown in this way. Yes. Well, I didn't draw every one in there, but yeah. From the trough, there's recovery until you expand. See, recovery means you're going from the trough back to the line. Whenever there's a trough, you got to recover to get back to the line. Just like whenever there's a peak, you're way above the line, and then you got to contract to get back to the line. So recovery and contraction means you're going towards the line again. So after that last trough, the next thing would be what? A recovery, where you would go towards the line. Then you're going to expand again above the line, and then you're going to hit a peak, and then you're going to go and contract again. And that's the long-term growth trend. Now, I go through this a lot in economics part 1. I don't do much of this in 2, only to bring back this graph in case we don't do part 1 together, because sometimes people ask what you asked for. I just need a review of supply and demand. Okay, great. So I put this in just to remind you that it's the supply and demand that lead these economic cycles. These economic cycles are dictated by that, by the demand curve. If you go to 13, what is aggregate demand? What does aggregate mean? Total. So total demand illustrates how much demand there is in the economy as a whole. Now, what would cause demand to shift and all of a sudden have more demand for goods and services? What would cause that shift in demand? Well, what's interesting about that is that if demand moves first, it moves because of something other than price. if aggregate demand were to shift, it shifts. That's a big, giant change. It means the whole line's going to move. What would cause that? Something other than price. This is where I think your weakness might be. You got to ask yourself in any question on demand or supply, is demand moving first or is price moving first? Which one's moving first? Because if price moves first, take a look at slide 15. If price moves from P1 down to P2, if price moves first, what happens to quantity demanded? It goes from X1 all the way over to X2, which means if price goes down, what happens to quantity demanded?
It's going to go up.
That's right. They call that a movement along that same demand line, that downward sloping demand line. Notice how we don't redraw the line. We just slide from that one point, P1X1. See that point, P1X1? When prices were up at P1, quantity demanded was X1. But when prices fell to P2, what happened to quantity demanded? It moved out to X2, which is good. It means as price falls, we expect quantity demanded to go up. Now, if it goes the opposite way, price goes up from P2 up to P1. See how price would be going up first? Price moves, goes up. What happens to quantity demanded? We go from X2 back to X1. Any leftward movements are bad. Any rightward movements are good. Yes, I'll illustrate that. It depends on what moves first. Here we have price moving first. Why would price move first? Now, this is macroeconomics, but we can insert a little microeconomics just to illustrate the point, because it doesn't really matter whether you're talking about macro or micro. It's the same idea. If price moves first, are you a Jet fan or a Giant fan? Okay. LA Rams, where are they playing now? LA? Okay, all right. I'm an old guy, so I remember when they played in LA. And okay, all right. So you're an LA Rams fan, all right? But you can't go to those games, right? Because where do you live? Right. So give me a team that you follow around New Jersey. The Knicks. All right. Now, if the Knicks were to raise prices of season tickets, and you had 4 seats, what would that do to your quantity demanded? Yeah, you'd probably go back to owning 2 seats, right? And that's what's illustrated here on slide 15. When price goes from P2 to P1, price goes up. You were holding 4 tickets, right? Because you were at P2, X2, holding 4 tickets, but they raised the price to P1, right? Now what happened to output? You're only buying 2 seats. You go back from X2 to X1. So when price moves first, causes a movement along this one demand line. All you're going to do is slide, in this case, up that line, because you're pulling back from being a 4-season ticket holder to 2 season tickets. Why? Because they raised the price. See, under the old price, P2, you were holding X2, which means you had that many tickets. But then when they raised the price from P2 to P1, you slid back and only wanted 2 seats. That's X1. See that? The shift? Well, it doesn't. If the demand moved first, we didn't talk about that yet. We talked about if the price moves first. If the price of tickets move first, what happens to quantity demanded for tickets? It moves in the opposite direction. So if they raise the prices and you were holding 4 seats, you're only going to buy 2, right? Okay, because price moves first. And whenever price moves first, quantity demanded moves, and it moves in the opposite direction of the price when the price moves first. Okay? That's because price moved first. That's key. Price moved before demand, right? But what if demand moves first? This is what you want to know, right? Okay, I'm going to try to find it on this slide deck. If not, I'll send you another one, but I think I have it here. See, I usually take an hour to go through this whole thing, but I'm moving around quickly for you because I think this is what you need to see. All right, go to 62. The New York Jets raised season ticket prices and experienced a decrease in ticket sales. That's what we just said, right? The team raised prices and quantity demanded goes down. On the demand curve, we call that what? Is that a movement or is that a shift? No. When prices move first, it's just a movement, as we saw along that same line. That's where we slid. Let's go back from 62. In fact, why don't we both do this? We'll grab that slide and we'll copy and paste it down to where that question about the Jets is. So go back to 16 or 15. Go back to 15 and let's copy and paste this slide. Right after the Jets question on 62. All right, because this illustrates exactly what that question is trying to say. Price moved first. The Jets raised prices from P2 to P1. See how price went up? From P2, the old price was lower. P1, the new price is higher. Well, where was output when we were at P2? Output was at X2, right? That's how many. Now it's going to be at X1. That's not a shift. That's just a movement. That same line, what happens? We just slid up the line. It was a slide up the line from X2, P2, that dot. See the dot P2, X2? We slid from that dot to the dot P1, X1. See how we just slid? That's a movement. When you slide along the existing demand line, that's a movement. That's not a shift. If price moves first like this, Jets raised prices, that's not going to cause a shift. That's going to cause just a movement along the same line. Now, you want to talk about a shift? Look at 65. What does this say? Aha. Demand moves first. Why? Not because of price, but because the Giants won the Super Bowl. Causes a shift in demand. Now everybody wants tickets. They want logo items. What's that going to do to price? Yep, it's going to move in the same direction. So when demand moves first, price moves in the same direction, in this case up. And what would you call this on 65 on the curve? This would look like what? Not a movement, but a shift to the right. Yes, and take a look on 67. This will be the illustration right here. Your old demand line for the Giants was AD. Then when they won the Super Bowl, demand for tickets and logo items shifted out to AD1. See the arrow pointing to the right? That's right. Look what moves first. That's the key. If demand moved first, like this, because the Giants won the Super Bowl, demand moved. It moved with nothing to do with price. The shift for Giant tickets and logo items had nothing to do with price. It had to do with the fact that they won the Super Bowl and everybody wanted a piece of it. So they went out, bought tickets, bought logo items, right? Well, AD shifted to AD1. And what does that do to prices? Prices were at P2, actually P0, I think it says there. Under the old AD line, see how price was P0? And what happens on the AD1 line? Where's price? P1. Yep, went up. So when demand moves first, it causes the price to change. It doesn't have to do with price. It actually caused the price to change. Look to see what happened first. In this case, demand moves first, price will move in the same direction. Now, let's review the previous one. Go back to 64. Look at the other chart. Here, price moved first. We said the Jets raised season ticket prices. And, yeah, the one right before the Giants winning the Super Bowl. The one that we just inserted, the new slide about. Okay? All right. So we said the old price was P2, and at P2 you were buying 4 seats. That's X2. P2, X2 was you buying 4 jet tickets. Okay? All right. Now, all of a sudden, they raised season ticket prices from P2 to P1. What do all season ticket holders do at that point? They basically buy less. If they were buying 4 seats, they're buying 2 now. And output moves back from X2 to X1. So if price moves first, quantity demanded moves in the opposite direction of the price move, right? This is the hard part. Which one's moving first? In this case, price is moving first. They raise season ticket prices. Which way is quantity demanded going to go? The opposite way. Yeah. If they were to lower prices of season tickets, which way would output be expected to go? Yeah. Yeah, let's see. If they went from P1, where you were buying 2 season tickets, and they lowered it to P2, now you'd be buying 4. But it's the same line, right? It's not a new line. We're not redrawing the line because price isn't going to result in a new line being drawn. Price is only going to result in a movement, slide up and down along the same line. When does the whole line move? Not unless demand moves first. And if demand moves, it's because of something other than price. It's because the Giants won the Super Bowl. Nothing to do with the price of the tickets. They won the Super Bowl. That's going to cause prices to go up. Because demand moved first, and when demand moves first, price is going to move in the same direction. So notice the AD line. Where was price at AD? It was P0. On slide 67 now, we're looking at the demand line moving. When demand moves first, it's because of something other than price, like the Giants winning the Super Bowl, that causes the shift in demand from AD to AD1. Look what that did to price. Prices went in the same direction as that increase in demand. Prices went from P0 up to P1. When price goes first, now we go back to 64. Yeah, this is important. This is why, this was me zeroing in on exactly what you said you needed today, right? And that's what I can do for you. Tell me what you need, we zero right in on it. That's right. That's right. And you can see that in this graph, which is what they'll do on the exam, is they'll give you this graph and they'll say, what does this graph represent? Is it a shift? Is it a movement? And you would say it represents a movement, a change in quantity demanded, a decrease in quantity demanded as a result of an increase in price. Let's say from P2 to P1, the movement is a drop in quantity demanded from X2 down to X1. Notice there's no new line. The line stays the same. When price moves first, we don't redraw the line. When price moves first, we just slide up and down the line. In this case, if price moves first and it goes up, then What happens to our line? We slide up, and we wind up at X1 as our new output. When price goes up from P2 to P1, our new quantity demanded slides up from X2 to X1. So on slide 68, where that T account looking thing is, nothing to do with T accounts, but that's how I like to illustrate things on the left and right sometimes. If there's a shift in aggregate demand, we're talking macroeconomics now. We're talking about the whole economy. We're not just talking about the Jets and Giants or any one particular company. That's microeconomics. If we're talking macroeconomics, a shift in aggregate demand would cause employment to go up. Why? Because of, a shift in that demand line, going to need more workers because there's more demand for goods and services in the economy. You're going to need more workers. Employment's up. GDP, output in the economy is up. Economic activity, up. We call that a shift in demand, and that causes price levels to go which way? Yeah, because when demand moves first, we know that price moves in the same direction. All right, now that's the macroeconomic look at it. What if it was micro? Increases, we're talking about the Giants just won the Super Bowl. Employment would go up. You would need more parking attendants at the stadium. You would need more security guards because there's going to be more people at the stadium. You need more people selling logo items. Employment's up at the stadium, right? This is a microeconomic look at this, right? GDP up, right, in the industry, in that company, up, output up, economic activity up, shift to the right. What's going to happen to prices? Up. Because a shift in demand causes prices to move in the same direction. All the good news is on the right. Right? Now let's look at a shift in demand decrease. Same slide, but we're on the left side now. All right, if we're talking microeconomics, if we're talking about the Jets going 2-14 and having a terrible season, what's going to happen to demand? Way down. Right? So demand moved, not because of price. Right? A shift in demand is not caused because of prices. It's because of a 2-14 season, right? That'll do it. And employment at the stadium, down. They won't need as many people working. GDP, output there, down. Economic activity, down. Shift to the left. And what's that going to do to price levels? It's going to cause price levels to drop because there's not... Right. If demand moves first and it goes down, prices are going to go down. You go to sports stores and see logo items for the Jets after a 2-14 season, they're blowing stuff out, right? They're blowing out stuff because nobody wants to buy it. They're reducing the price just to get rid of it. They're trying to blow it out. They can't get rid of it. Price levels drop when there's a shift to the left in demand. Now, you want to talk about macroeconomics decrease? If circumstances causes overall demand for goods and services in the economy, the whole economy to drop, now we're talking macroeconomics. Maybe you have the housing crisis back in 2009. Employment down. Drop in overall demand, employment's going to go down. Businesses are laying people off because there's not as much demand for products now. Not as much demand for services, so you don't need as many workers. Employment down in the economy. GDP in the economy overall down. Economic activity down. That's a shift to the left, and what's that going to do to prices? It's going to drop. Price levels are going to go down. So this is the same whether we're talking macroeconomics or microeconomics. The difference is macro, we're talking about the whole economy. Micro, we're focusing in on one company. An increase or shift right in aggregate demand causes what? Yeah, right. If demand moves first and it moves to the right, prices are going to be drawn up. And that's an increase in GDP. So demand moving to the right will cause prices to go up. Now, we didn't explain why demand just went up. The question didn't tell us why demand went up. It just said that it did, right? It didn't say the reason why demand went up was, doesn't matter. If demand goes up first before price moves, that's going to cause price to go up too. We don't know what caused it, but demand did go up, which means you're going to have more output, increase in real GDP, and increase in the prices. And you can see that illustrated on 70 in the same graph that we showed the Giants winning the Super Bowl. So whether it's macro or microeconomics, a shift in demand, we redraw the line. In this case, the new line is to the right of the old line. An increase in demand causes prices to go up from the old price, P0, to the new price, P1. And notice output goes up from Y0 to Y1. All right, 71. The movement along the demand curve from one price quantity combination. Yes, that's a change in quantity demanded. When you see movement, that means price moved first, and that's going to change quantity demanded. Quantity demanded is going to move in the opposite direction of that price movement, right? That's right. Prices go up, quantity demanded's got to go down. So you were buying 4 season tickets, then they raised the price, now you're only buying 2 season tickets. So if price moves first, quantity demanded is going to go in the opposite direction. But if demand moves first, price is going to go in the same direction, and that's the major breakthrough we had today. Right? Now you got it.
Yeah, I think I'm understanding this a lot more.
73. Well, this is how we know whether you got it or not. We just do these questions. That's how you know. Which one of the following is most likely to accompany a reduction in aggregate demand? So demand moves first, and it moves which way? That's right. Yeah. Reduction in demand. What's next? Yep. Which one says reduction in price? I don't see that one. Right. So it's not that. It's not reduction in price that we're looking for, but that would be the right answer. Certainly that knocks out A. That's right. You're going to decrease employment, which is D, right? Now let's talk about supply.